What is going on, everybody? Hope you're having a blessed day. If you've been at these before, let us know in the chat if you've been here and this is you've been here multiple times, or if this is your first time, let us know as well. And also let us know where you're tuning in from. We always like to hear that. And I always like to ask a question that's a little bit different. How are you feeling this week? Are you feeling up? You're feeling down? It's the middle of the week. It's Wednesday, so you either could be like, "Yo, I'm cruising this week. I'm doing okay." But Florin, I actually have a crazy story.
Let's hear it.
I promise y'all have never experienced this in your life, and I'm gonna be transparent with y'all. Like I've been a little out of it. I'm gonna be real. I've been a little out of it this week, and I'm gonna tell y'all why. You're gonna be like, "What in the world, Morgan?" So I was in Vegas for an event. That wasn't being reckless. I was in Vegas for an event. It was a good time. I got to see my cousin. I haven't seen him in a while, and his family. And I was coming back on Sunday. And so I'm doing my thing. I've checked in my flight already. I'm on the way to the airport. Everything is fine, right? I get to the airport. I look at the Delta app, and it's like, check in. And it's like, bro, I've already checked in. What do I need to check in again for? And it says Las Vegas to Oklahoma City. And I'm like, Oklahoma City? I don't know about y'all. I do not book layover flights. I only book direct. I'm from Atlanta. We don't do that. So I'm like, okay, what is going on? And so I go to the agent and I was like, hey, like, what is going on here? And she's like, oh yeah, like the flight got diverted. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, the flight got diverted to OKC. You need to recheck in. So I was like, this person isn't that helpful. So I checked in, went to the gate. Bro, you'll never believe this. They were like, hey, all of our flights right now in Las Vegas are going to the East Coast. We can't fly them direct because it's too hot in Vegas and the fuel is burning too fast and we won't be able to make it. So we have to divert. This is crazy. We have to divert to Oklahoma City, fill up. So we had to sit on the airplane for like 45 minutes an hour, then go from OKC to Atlanta, which is like another 2-hour flight. So this 12:30 flight I was supposed to be on, supposed to get back at like 7. Dude, I didn't get back till like midnight, 1 a.m. because of all this craziness. Have you ever heard of that before? It was too hot and we couldn't do a direct flight.
That doesn't even make sense. I swear that does not make sense.
But they did it for every single flight. Every single flight going to the East Coast had to go to OKC and fill up and then go to Atlanta. So I was like, yo, I'm not trying to go to OKC, but forcing function. Literally, I tried to go on every other flight. They all said the same thing. Tried to go the next day. All the flights got canceled. So luckily I got out of there. But dude, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's too hot in the world that the fuel's burning too fast. We have to stop somewhere else. Oh, this is wild. Sure, I know the whole airport was messing with this. Every single flight had to do it. It wasn't just mine. Craziness. So yeah, be careful out there, y'all. It's madness. So, Cadence Teardown, y'all. Here we are. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can set up your cadence, but also as well, like what are some steps you can put into it. And, before we go into that, Florin, if you want to introduce yourself to the audience here, and we'll get into it.
Yeah, super excited to be here. What's up, everybody? Florin Tatulea here. Currently the director of sales at a company called Barley, selling into HR and compensation leaders, but been in the tech scene for about 10 years. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I try to drop tips on a weekly basis. Got my newsletter too, which is prospecting from the trenches, because I still prospect to this day, every day. So everything that I preach and teach is stuff that I'm doing on a daily basis. I don't like to just talk the talk, definitely walking the walk.
Love it. And I'm Morgan Ingram, y'all's the host here today. I'm going to walk y'all through everything. Founder of Ascension Media Productions, and also as well, creator over here at Cognism. And again, we're going to dive into this. So, as we get into this, these are the cadences best practices, right, Florin? Tell us about the cadence best practices here.
100%. So maybe a little bit controversial, but what I've been seeing working recently. So one, I think it's super important that you have cadences that are, 50 plus days, maybe 2 months. 30 steps seems to be working extremely well. And one of the new tactics that I'm working on right now is only focusing on email and not even worrying about cold calls, no social selling. And right now, this seems to be working really well for me.
Yeah, if you need to send emails every single time, I mean, at this point, that's just the route to go as well. And if you're not doing that, then yeah, game over. Psych, y'all. We kidding. If you actually took this as advice, I don't know. You'd be wrong. So yeah, that's not what you should be doing. Let's talk about what you should be doing for you all out there. So let's break into it. So first and foremost, let's talk about channels to use. Y'all, like, multi-touch is critical. So you should be using every single channel and double down where you're getting responses. I would even say as well, like, I was appalled. Yeah, some people probably like, yo, what kind of webinar is this? No. We are joking. So this slide right here, this is actually important. I would screenshot this and do the opposite of what this says. Do the opposite of all this. But yeah, use every single channel. I truly believe that you have to use every single one because you don't know how people are going to reply. You don't know how people are engaged with you. So you need to make sure they use every single one. Do not dismiss that. It'd be a huge mistake if you did. So definitely pay attention to using these 4. I mean, there's even more, right? If you want to do direct mail, things of that nature, but there's that. But Florin, tell us about, I mean, you've been building teams, you're advising teams as well. You were doing this yourself. You're prospecting every single day. Tell us about the length of the cadence and the number of touch points.
Yeah. And I think in my 10 years, I probably tried hundreds, if not thousands of different sequences. I'm super big on A/B testing because obviously, like, different personas, different markets, different things are going to work on different people. But the thing that has been, like, unequivocally working well for me has been following a similar structure to the Goji sequence by obviously the famous Sam Nelson from Outreach. I have some tweaks to it, but I definitely think that in terms of cadence length, like 17 to 21 business days is super important. Now, one of the main reasons why I say that, it's not just like a random number. So why is that actually the case? It's because, one, you have to give the prospect enough time to get back to you. Like, you have to realize that you could send the most fire email, you can cold call someone at the perfect time that data says is like the perfect pickup rate, but what if someone's on vacation? What if someone's dealing with, like, their kid and there's an emergency? What if they're in a meeting, right? So no matter what, you can never over-index on one single piece of outreach, and you need to give people time to get back to you and actually see that message. So that's really why the 17 to 21 day business day period works extremely well. And then for number of steps too, like, I know you probably keep hearing this as a best practice, but I get prospected every day, and sometimes I let sequences run and no one ever does more than like 8 steps. Like, I can probably count 2 to 3 in my last 10 months in my current role where someone has actually done more than 8 to 12 steps. And so I think the issue is there, not that people don't know this. It's like, why are we not actually executing on that? Is it because you're reaching out to too many people at once and you can't follow through with everyone and there's bottlenecks? Is it something else? Like, we'd love to even hear from some people in the audience, or Morgan, if you have any thoughts there.
In terms of doing too many steps?
No, I feel like people don't actually end up executing on all their sequence steps. Usually I notice that a lot of prospects, a lot of SDRs drop off like halfway through a sequence. Even when I was managing SDR teams, like, there would always be some form of a bottleneck. Like, everyone knows that you should hit up and
I feel like it's this is like what my read was as manager, is that because there's certain things you just don't want to do. So for example, if it gets to like the call step, it's like, I don't want to do this. So all the call steps just get like bottlenecked to like 200, right? And then you're like, oh, I guess I'll skip them, right? So I think a lot of people, they get to a certain step and they're like, I don't feel like doing this step. So then they're like, they'll do the steps that they're excited about. So if it's like, some people are like, I really want to write an email today, so they get fired up about it, right? Or some people are like, I'm on the video step, so now I could do the video step now. I think a lot of people, they get to a step and they're just not feeling it, and so they just don't do it. And then it ends up having 200, 300 people in that step. And I've seen that a lot. So I think it's one of those things where you have to be disciplined and you have to just go through that step instead of getting emotional about the step, which again is like easier said than done. But I think that's how people should focus on it.
Yeah. And I do think, though, if there is a big bottleneck, like you have 300 in a certain step and it's like destroying the frequency of your outreach, I do think it's okay to skip steps at some point just to push people through and maybe
Yeah.
reevaluate if you're either adding too many prospects up front, or if you're spending too much time on a specific portion of the sequence, or like it's taking you too long to write an email. Maybe you need to automate a few more steps. So there's a few different things there.
So people put this in here too as well, right? It's like, okay, there could be too many accounts to handle, and then if someone says, I think another reason why that happens is the buyer isn't clear and leads you to having to reach out to too many different personas at one time. So yeah, I mean, that's leadership and that's rep dependent as well. Like, you should know as a rep how many accounts you should be going after. If you're just like going crazy with it, then like, yeah, that's probably why you're getting bottlenecked, but that's something you have to do your due diligence on. And I think also reaching out to too many personas. This is my belief. I've trained teams and they've had 100, 200, 300 cadences, sequences, whatever. And I was like, oh my, like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? It's just too many. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, you should have 5 to 10 cadences, like maximum 10, like to be fair. Like, you don't need to be doing that many. Like, you could literally create templates and different things inside of different cadences and things of that nature to make this extremely efficient. And I've done them before. Like, it's just, I think people get so happy about creating a cadence, and it's like such a like, this is an amazing, I created a cadence, and then you have too many, which is why people get bottlenecked. It's not an efficient flow. It's all over the place.
Yeah, 100%. And just to answer a question here too, like, is this best practice for SMB, mid-market, or global? So I think the sequence structure actually works for all of them, and it has worked for all of them when I've managed all those different various teams as well. I think the main difference is the more strategic you go in your accounts, the less automated steps there are. So if you have, let's say, 6 emails with 2 threads in your sequence, when you're going like SMB or like high volume, maybe you're just customizing the first email and then the other 5 are somewhat like automated or at least relevant in some way.
Mm.
If you're going strategic where you have less accounts, more time to focus on those accounts, I think that's when you go to like 3, 4 emails that are actually manual and well-researched. That's the big difference for me.
Yeah, you're spot on that, because and the way that I see cadences is it goes into just 3 realms. Like, one is like extremely tailored, where it's like I'm going after probably my top 25, top 50. Probably every email call is going to be very like intentional. Like the second tier essentially would be like targeted, so it's like persona based, and then tier 3 is like, hey, we're just templated, we're going to check things out. That's how I've always seen it, and in each org that's been successful that I've trained or been a part of, that's the way they went about it. But yeah, there's nuances it too as well, as you're talking about. It's incredibly important.
For sure.
So
yeah. The last thing I'm going to say quickly too on number of sequences, and I think this is a big mistake that every company's making. It's like you should have 4 to 6 sequences max. Obviously, it depends a little bit on like how many different industries you sell into and all that kind of stuff. But for one SDR, I don't believe that you need more than 4 to 6 sequences. And I do believe that as teams get bigger, they should be somewhat centrally controlled by management enablement. And then even like, we used to have a sequence committee so that every month or quarter, we would have like SDRs as part of that committee that would update the sequences, and then you let those run for a while, because you need to see what's working. If you have 100 sequences, you don't know what's working. Like, everyone's doing their own thing. There's an SDR that's absolutely killing it, but no one like fully understands why. So
because majority of it is because they're falling through the motions. And that's the key. And so this is actually a really good question, because I'm actually going to bring this question up because I think this is important for us to talk about real quick. What's the sweet spot of how many prospects in each cadence, regardless of the accounts you have? I mean, I don't know how you're going to answer this. Extremely difficult to answer because there's so many different factors, right? Because it's like, how many meetings are you looking to hit? How big are these companies? What are you looking to do? The easiest way to go about this is you have to do reverse engineer math, because that will give you the exact answer. No one will be able to give you the exact answer unless you do the math. So the math, like, pretty simple, basically is saying, hey, look, I have to hit X amount of meetings per month. My average conversion rate is X, which if you've been in sales for a while, you should know what that is based on outbound conversions. And then once you figure out the outbound conversions, you're like, how many people do I need to reach out to per day to hit that conversion? The math on all of this is very simple. The effort is the hardest part, right? Because you got to do it every single day. But if you break it down like that, it becomes a lot easier to maintain, figure out, go after, and then do it from there. So that's what I would tell you in that regard. And that should help you gauge you in the right way. Optimally, I could give you a number, but everyone's going to be different if you understand that number.
Yeah. Yeah, Ari, I agree. I think like you can't really say regardless of accounts or like of your quota, because it is dependent on it. That's like the way it is.
Yeah. We
But
don't have a simple answer unless you have something.
so I remember reading something from Outreach too, who are obviously like thought leaders and have the data. But I remember at Outreach, they did 50 new contacts per day. So I would say like most people are probably kind of like in that mid-market type of company on average, where you're selling like 20, 50K deals. Like if you're following through with all the different steps you have in your sequence over 17 to 21 days, 8 to 12 steps, and you're being thoughtful in your outreach, I do think it's kind of hard to do that properly above 15 or 20 per day.
Yeah. So let's get back into what we were talking about and sharing the screen here. We'll go to the next slide. And now that you have the best practices and things of that nature, what we want to be able to touch on now is really just giving y'all something that this is personally what I use. So I call the transformer cadence, essentially because you could do it any way you want to, essentially like a transformer. But the thing that I've actually seen to be the most successful is leading the cadence with a LinkedIn connection request. I found that when I did that, I had an increase in email responses and cold call responses. And the interesting thing about this piece here is that I also don't do a note inside of my connection requests. When I say this, everyone gets up on a tizzy and they're like, oh, well, I need a note, da da da. Like, it is what it is. The data says that if you don't send a note, you're going to have a higher acceptance rate. That's just the way that it goes. And that's what I would recommend. So if you're sending a note versus no note, and you're like, I don't believe that, A/B test it, you'll find that the no actually has a higher acceptance rate. Pretty crazy, but that's just the way it is. Then the second day, I send a personalized email. And then the third day, this is when it gets very interesting. So day 3, I do a cold call. If they don't answer, I do a voicemail and tell them that I'm going to send them an email like in the next like 5 minutes. So I send an email like literally right after the voicemail is done. And that's like my hyper aggressive approach. Like I'm hitting you with 4 touches in 3 days, and that's just the way I do it. Then 5 and 7, those days are like ghost calls. Basically, I don't leave a voicemail. I just see if I can catch them on the phone. 10, relevant based email. That's just based on the persona. That's not as personalized. 13, another ghost call. 15, I do a visual. So it's like a case study or something like a quote or whatever that may be. 18, I leave a voicemail. That's a lot shorter than the first one. And then day 21, I do a cadence closer. That's basically, it's a goodbye email. I hot take on this one. I don't believe in breakup emails because it doesn't make sense. You can't break up with someone that you've never talked to before. That logically makes 0 sense. So I call it a goodbye email. You'll see. I think we'll have an example of that later here in the presentation. But Florin, what's your take on this? This is actually my typical cadence. So this is what I typically train people on. And obviously, audience, y'all can give feedback too. But this is one I've seen to be pretty successful.
Yeah. You have a lot of the elements that I would as well. Like you have bursts, for example, like you're doing a call and an email on day 3. I think it's like pretty spaced out over. Is this business days, like 18 business days?
Oh, there's business days. Yeah, these are business days. Yep.
Yeah. So pretty similar. I do tend to go a bit more aggressive myself, where I'll have pretty much the way that I think about my sequences. I have 2 email threads per sequence. The first 2 emails in those threads are like my personalized emails that are based off of like my email framework and, are relevant and well-researched. Then the next 2 emails in each thread are the bump up emails, which is not just like thoughts anymore. It's more like, thoughts. And then you want to remind them of like what that first email was, because otherwise you're making them do a little bit of work. Because imagine you just get an email in your inbox or on your phone, it's like thoughts. One, some people can take it as passive aggressive, but then it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't even know. So you have to go and like open it up, and you're just making that person do like extra work and try to recall what this was about when they probably just don't know.
Right.
And the last 2 emails in each thread are going to be what I call value-based emails. And a value-based email to me is not a case study or something that's self-serving. It's like an industry report, benchmark report, like a blog post that's relevant to your persona, maybe not even from like your own website. The idea is that you only have so many like takes before you have to like give something, right? So I like to give at least a few times in my sequences. And then, so those are the email threads. And then obviously you're coupling LinkedIn and phone calls. I like to do triple bursts. So like LinkedIn profile view, or a connection request, email, and phone call like within an hour or two.
Jonathan said, would you consider chucking in a personalized video early on in the cadence, or when would you introduce this? I'll give my take. I personally don't like doing it in the beginning. That's me. I like doing it in the middle after like I've sent a note, I've done an email, etc. That's like the typical way I like to go about it. Like so that'd be like between day 7 and day 10. That's like typically when I'm sending my video.
Yeah, I agree. So the problem with video in the first step, one, there could be a potential deliverability issues, especially as you go more enterprise with a link.
Yep.
It also depends on your persona. When I was selling to engineering leaders, I know for a fact engineering leaders do not click on random links. Like I've been told
it's not happening.
It's not happening. So it doesn't make sense. The point where it makes sense to invest in a video, like you said, is a little bit later on in the sequence. Once you see that a prospect is potentially engaged, opened an email 2 to 3 times, clicked on a link if you have one somewhere, right? Then go ahead and spend that like 5, maybe 10 minutes, like building a more personalized video. Apart from that, I think videos are very good once you're in conversation with a prospect. You just got off a cold call, you just got off a discovery call, and now you want to summarize it, like show your face, stand out, and be memorable. That's when I really like video.
Well, hopefully that answers the question there, Jonathan. And let's go to this one, and then we'll one more question, and then we'll hop in some examples here. What percentage of conversion is considered good, both calls and emails? So I believe it's 1 to 3% for emails. I don't know what the cold call is. It's probably so crazy data nowadays, but I do know that the email is 1 to 3% response rate, and I think average open rate is like 23%. I think that's the industry standard right now, but obviously that changes a lot. But I don't know if you know on the call side for what that data is.
Yeah, I think so. The last data that I saw, so a few points of clarification here. Conversion rate, it's like, what are you talking about there? So from call to connect, from my understanding, if you get like anywhere above 5%, it's very good. Again, depends on the industry. And then conversion, right now, that's like dropped in 2023. But I think if you have like a 10% plus conversion from like connect to booking, you're doing well. Obviously that changes. Like when you're an SMB, I know some people selling to like restaurant owners or something, like they're going to pick up the phone more and you're more likely to convert them because it's like a low ticket price item or whatever.
Right.
It could be up to 30% conversion rates. So that's actually another important lesson. Just don't take data or take all data with a grain of salt because it's so industry specific. It depends on so many things. So like, if your email or open rates and call rates are super low, yes, it's possible that like you need to improve significantly, but it's also, you need to compare it to other people in your industry and the persona you're selling to.
So Harsh, let us know that question was helpful, or that answer was helpful. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to share this as well. What do you think about the usage of gifting inside of Cadence? Has it proven useful by some of the people here? So in the chat, if you use gifting for prospecting, let me know if it's helpful. Florin, how you're using it? Are you using it for your teams? What's going on there?
So I've never used a gifting platform like the Sendosos of the world. So I don't want to like speak too much about it. We have done gifting where we've had like our marketing team literally in the office, like building out packages and shipping them to target accounts.
Okay.
It does tend to work well. It is obviously like, in my opinion, a more strategic play. This is not, I would like make sure you have a target list of accounts and send like well thought out gifts to certain people. But again, I don't have too much thoughts on this, so I don't want to like ramble on about it because I don't actively do it.
I did it back in, it was early days, maybe like 2019. So the only time that I did it was because I was sending videos to people and I would send them a movie box popcorn to enterprise accounts. And if they didn't watch the video, I'd be like, hey, here's some popcorn so you can watch your video. That was the only time I really did a direct mail. And to some degree it was successful before. And also it was kind of shady too, because some people took the gift and never replied. I was just like, yo, what? That's just messed up. But anyway, yeah, so I did have some people that responded to that, and they liked it with the popcorn plus watching a video. That worked out really well. But that's like the only time I've done it. I don't like, this might be a hot take, whatever, but I don't like people sending gift cards to then get a meeting. For some reason, I don't like that tactic. Now, someone could tell me that they find benefit in that, and I'm open to hearing that. But personally, I don't like sending gifts as in like, here's a $50 gift card and let's do an exchange for a meeting. I think the intent of the meeting becomes not of value, but of like just basically, hey, I'm just telling you to take this meeting because I'm paying you. And for some reason, I don't really like that to start off a sales cycle. I don't know what your take on that is, but I personally just don't like that approach.
I agree. I've like definitely tried that myself too. Like we've tried the Uber Eats like campaigns and stuff. What I've actually realized is that most people, even if they reply, are not going to like take the gift card sometimes. Or like when I've offered like lunch in the past, they're like, it's against my morals, or like, I don't want to do it. So that's quite a common theme for me. So I don't know. I don't think it's the best approach. To me, it's like at the end of the day, your job when you're booking meetings is to close revenue. If you need to entice someone with a gift card or with money or something to get on a call, what are the chances that that person's actually there to to actually have a formal evaluation? And my experience in the past is when we used to give $100 Amazon gift cards. I remember we tried it out. We got a ton of demos,
Yeah.
and almost none of them ever closed.
That's an interesting data point. So you obviously got a ton of meetings, ton of demos, but none of them closed.
No.
Which makes sense.
So yeah.
I just think you're not leading with the intent of what the meeting is for. So it almost is like, what is the point? Which I think is what we're talking about here. So another thing here as well is like, so any best practices you'd recommend when reaching out to executive level people? They open emails like 5-10 times, but don't respond that easily. So let's dive into that question, and we'll go back into the slides.
Okay, so they open emails quite a bit, but they never respond.
I said this is when you just send them a video like we're talking about. This is the perfect time to do that.
And maybe this is super obvious, but I think one thing that a lot of people don't do enough of is they don't pick up the phone right when they see those notifications. Like if you see someone open an email twice, like in this moment, even if you're on this like webinar right now, I would literally call that person right now.
Yeah. Typically they're probably looking at their phone. They're going to see it, answer it, or I'd send them a video. That's like what I would do there. So Harash, hopefully that helps answer you there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to shift here and we're going to go to some cadence examples. So this is from the Cognism team here. So there's a little bit of an inverse. So we have send a connection request, and then call, and then an email goes out. I do. You'll see here that a lot of people do like that LinkedIn connection request. I still think it's the best thing to do. I think some people do it later, but I find that like sending that connection request in the beginning, it sets the intention. Like, here I am. Here's what's going on. People know what you're about. Like I feel like that's the best way of doing it. I don't really have any other way of how I go about it. Now you're gonna see here. There's what day one. Day one, they're doing 3 steps. So, Florin, is this you talking about earlier when you're just like, hey, you'll go super aggressive? So there's a LinkedIn connection request here, a call, and an email. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what we do. So the first step, it's like a triple burst on that first day.
Yep.
So blank connection request or just a profile view, maybe for the very first one. I write an email and then we send, then I do a call. And so this is actually an interesting topic because I was just on a Twitter thread and someone asked like, what's your first step in a cadence? For me, it's an email. And Jen from Lavender, Jen Allen, who's an amazing, had a very good point. Like when you write something down, it's like, that's how you think. Writing is thinking. And the reason it's good to have that as a first step is because it makes you think about why are you actually reaching out to this person? I feel like sometimes when people go through like 100 cold calls and just bang them out. First of all, it's very difficult to like actually research that person, and you don't actually have a good reason for why you're reaching out to them. So it gets you to stop and think, write a personalized email. And then 2, it's actually a very good script for your call if you're doing the emails well.
That's a really good call out. Because I think also as well, some people just are like, I just want to get on the phone and I can rip it and just go. And like very far and few between people who could do that successfully and just like get on the phone and just get involved. But to your point, if you're able to get on there and say, okay, let me write out my emails, let me be more thoughtful, and then now I could send out that call or that video or whatever I'm doing, you're going to be well off. So this is one of those examples here. One of the emails, and we're just going to go through here and just critique it here. We're going to tear down part of the emails that Cognism has here. So, Florin, what's your take on this? This looks actually, yeah, this is an email here. What's your take on this one?
Let's see here. Took a peek on your LinkedIn and saw you're leading a sales team. So, a few things. I think starting off with the subject line, open to a different way. For me, subject lines always have to sound somewhat internal and like kind of boring, but sparking curiosity. So I think this is actually pretty good. You're asking a question. It is a bit of a pattern break. I don't see this type of subject line often. I love that the email is super short. The only problem I have here is that like, for me, you still need to provide some context for like what you are actually doing. And I think that misses it a little bit. I like the fact that it's super short, but what I notice is that people are not specific enough. And if you're very vague, people that are busy tend to be like, I don't have time for like answering these like questions and going back and forth in an email thread. So like, what do you actually do? Just tell me at least in one sentence on top of that, what you do.
So I would say that, and there's something that recently was on a webinar with Tyler Washington. He's at Falcons, head of content, used to be an SDR. And one thing that he does in his emails is he'll have like a leading value prop or pain point in there in the middle, which I agree with. And instead of saying, are you open to an email exchange? He'll say, are you open to me sending you a video so I can provide more details? Which I do like that, because then it gives you an in to get deeper in with the video. And if you're good with video and you can screen share and you're good like on camera, I think that's actually a really good angle to take. So I wanted to throw that in there. Like if it's not an email exchange, maybe it's like, hey, this is what I'm noticing, but I want to send you a video, right? And I'm going to walk you through that. I think that's a good additional point here that can be made.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, I think Emma mentioned something in the comments here. Does a question in the subject line come across as salesy rather than internal? I think that is a good point. I think that's fair. Probably if I was to change the subject line, I would like literally just put a different way. And then it would just be like very vague, like, what are you talking about? But still on topic if you're going to include that in the actual email.
And I want to go back to what someone said. What's the logic behind the blank LinkedIn requests? The logic is that if you all right now think about all the connection requests that you get and it's personalized, the likelihood of you accepting it is actually lower because it's typically you're going to get pitched. That's the reason why you probably don't respond to it. So I've just noticed that when I send a blank connection request, to people that are, higher up or whatever it may be, they just accept it because I guess there's mysteriousness. There's not a real intent there. So that's my psychoanalysis of that. Florin, I don't know if you have one, but like, that's just what I've analyzed over time. And it continuously has been the same, where the blank request does lead to higher acceptance rates. And so I would also just paint to that. And I would do that moving forward if I were you in the scenario.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I tested that too, like blanks, connection requests versus more not necessarily customized, but putting something in there. Blank usually works better. And just from my own experience, I usually like automatically accept blank requests as a sales leader. But yeah, it's only because usually when there's something in the note, it's very generic, first of all. And I know it's like usually a salesperson. So it's not you want to somehow interrupt the pattern. That being said, if you actually have a thoughtful note that's not salesy, I think that works as well. But get away from that generic connection request.
So let's get into the next piece here. So this is another email example, and so this email example is someone that sent an email to one of the leaders here at Cognism. So we're going to just break this down. We're just showing you different examples of like what you can do, what you cannot do. Florin, give your breakdown on the assessment on what you think about this email example here. And also, as you think about and read through that email, Florin, if you all have questions, put them in the Q&A. I see the questions coming in the chat, but sometimes they can be missed. So if you can, put it in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as we can, as we see here. But we'll let Florin read this email, give his assessment. But everybody, please put your questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to as many as we can. So, Florin, what's your take here? This is a day one email. We could give your take on it, and then we'll dive into the chat here.
Yeah. And first of all, like these emails are all like pretty good. I think we're definitely nitpicking here. The average email in my inbox has been significantly worse than both of these already. So you're all doing a good job, first of all. I would say, so I think a lot about the preview sentence. And funny enough, I literally just saw Mark Cuban on a podcast where he talked about how he gets 1,000 emails a day. And the only way that he decides whether he responds is based off of the first sentence. So this first sentence to me kind of automatically signals in the preview that it's a sales email. So I think it's not only going to affect open rates, obviously reply rates as well. So I don't know if I would go with that approach personally. Then I think that second sentence is okay. The only other thing I would say is that last sentence, would something similar also be of interest to you? I think that's fine, but then let me know. I'll send over a few times. That last sentence is not adding any value. It's wasted real estate. Just like completely get rid of it. Make that email shorter. I think that's generally it. Like there is obviously social proof here. Hopefully that's relevant. If you're going to use Microsoft, please make sure that you're selling to enterprise organizations. I don't think that a startup cares too much about cloud security like Microsoft. They feel like they're in different worlds. So that's the only other thing I would say.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think also as well is that like just reading, I posted a video about this the other day, read your email out loud. There's a lot of times when you do that, you'll realize I don't need this in the email at all. There's no reason that it needs to be here, which then allows you to remove things that don't need to be there, right? That ultimately is the key. So hopefully that's helpful for some people there. We'll go to the next slide on this email, and then we'll answer some questions here as we transition real quick. But here's another email example. Again, this is something that was sent to the leader. So again, we're just going through what people have out there. And again, we're just showing y'all different examples of what frameworks you could use, frameworks you don't want to use. But we'll let Florin read through this. And yes, the subject line, Paul, we didn't get a subject line on this one. Sorry, we'll try to recover. I'll figure out on that, and then we'll answer this question here in a minute, Camille, from you. Recommended word count for emails. We'll dive into that after Florin gives us feedback on this email here.
Yeah, I think going back to that first email, I think the subject line here, "Are you losing this?" can potentially come across as a little bit salesy. That being said, it does, thinking for myself here, like it does spark a bit of curiosity. Like, what is this person talking about? What am I losing? So in some sense, it's doing the job. Just have to make sure that it's like not too deceiving by looking at the actual copy. So the subject line should not be deceiving in the sense that whatever you're talking about in the subject should be somewhat related to what you're talking about in the thread. That's like my general rule of thumb. Has led to the loss of at least 2 to 4 hours a week. Like, I think that's a fair connection. But again, I don't know if I would go with a question necessarily. Now, going back again to the preview sentence, and don't want to hyperfixate on this, but think about this. So first thing you see in that preview text with the subject line, "I was on LinkedIn and found out you are in charge of finance." You're probably going to see "I was on LinkedIn and found out you" as the preview there. Automatically signal sales email. So I would probably just cut that completely and just get into, was chatting with one of your employees, and I'm not sure if this is accurate, but notice that you use ride hailing services at a retail level. So shorten it, get rid of that first part. That second block, to me, like, think about this on a slide. This looks like a lot of text. Imagine that on a cell phone, which is where most people read the email first. It's going to look like a huge block of text. So I think this is too many words overall. I would space it out better. and just more succinct. Like it sounds like you're saying the right things, but how can you, I'm pretty sure if we sat down, we could cut that literally in half without changing anything of what you're saying.
I think it's always about trimming. I think that's the main thing that we're hearing now is just continuously trim it and try to figure out how do you get to the optimal rate. So that actually just leads into like the question, right? Like, what's the recommended word count for emails?
I believe like Lavender had some data on this. You want to, generally speaking, under 100, like if you can. I think 50, the data says is really good, but to me, it goes back to that first email example. It's like you're not specific enough. You have to like give a reason or an understanding of like what you actually do, and it's hard to do that in 50 words. I tend to find that very short emails sometimes work better for like below the line if you're trying to spark a conversation, and below the line is like lower level employees. But for executives, they want like a line of what's the so what do you do, just freaking tell me. I don't have time for like back and forth. So
No,
75 words, I would say, like if you can.
50 to 75 is optimal. That's what I'd aim for. I know some people are like, well, what if I need to do more? Fine, you can do that, but that's the optimal range you want to go for. Now, this question is actually interesting, and I'm going to stop the share because I'm going to talk about this one for a minute. What about using bold text in a mail to attract attention to that part? So basically, using bold text in the email.
I think it's fine if it's one thing that's bolded. I've seen emails where you have like 4 to 5 things bolded, and then the whole purpose of bolding has been.
You're doing way too much at that point.
Yeah. I think if there's like a few words you want to call attention to, that's fine. Like to do it once, but not more than that.
And then this is in the alignment because now this is semantics, but I think these are always important. Would you use bullet points in an email so they can scan?
So I've used bullets successfully. I think the very big distinction here, it's not about the bullets, it's about what the bullet points say. The reason that bullet points often don't work is because people list out features.
Yep.
I used bullet points in the past to list out problems. And make that prospect understand that I knew their world. That actually worked okay for me. So from what I've experienced, it's not the bullet points that are the issue. It's what's in the bullet points.
Do you have a like, hey, don't do 5, don't do 6? Do you have like
3 bullet points?
Okay.
There's like literally a psychological rule that says like we consume data better in 3. I can find the source after.
I say the same thing. I was curious if you were relying on that. Like, don't do 8,000 bullet points, right? Even when you do the bullet points, don't bold the bullet points because sometimes people do that too. So it's all about just remaining consistent in that and doing those certain things across the board. So we have a lot of different pieces here. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. Some more questions that are coming here in as well. And okay, so when we're looking at this is actually interesting. When we're looking at this piece right here, is Craig kind of like put it into a lot of different pieces, and I think this is like a lot of things we can answer. In regards to email lists for context, I work in publishing. I have access to a lot of data in regards to our prospects audience. Current cadences are quite bulky, but do bring a lot of value. Where is this sweet spot here? I always believe in escalation. So like your emails start off like short sentences, like two to 4 sentences, and then it starts getting like to like maybe 8 sentences and 9 sentences to provide more value. But Florin, what's your take on this from Clark's standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously great if you have a lot of data and you can provide a lot of value. What I would do is I would keep each email short, still like under 100 words, ideally 75, and just break down the data that you know across multiple steps in your sequence. Like, don't put all your eggs in one basket in that first email with all the value.
Craig, hopefully it'll help answer the question there. Let us know. And then Schuler has a thing here. My first email has bullets describing my company's capabilities, and second email threaded has bullets asking problem-solving questions. So yeah, no, I absolutely believe that as well. So that's a key thing. And then here's a question because this is something like I'll kind of dive into this a little bit, but obviously Cognism, so put that in there. Obviously, you can go check that out, Harash, if you want to. But any advice on how to gauge people because Europe and GDPR, the best thing that you can do is also LinkedIn. Like that's another route that you could take to get in front of those individuals. But Florin, any takes on this from the GDPR standpoint if you've been running into this with you and your team?
I don't have a ton of experience selling into Europe. So again, don't want to like talk too much about something I don't have experience in. But yeah, I think there's definitely other systems in addition to ZoomInfo that I keep hearing are better for Europe, without like sounding like I'm being paid here or anything. I have honestly heard that Cognism does have better numbers in Europe than ZoomInfo. And then yeah, like you just have to rely on other channels. Like there's not much you can do in terms of that with regulations, right?
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, you can't, right? Because that makes email harder. That's why I always recommend people, hey, if you can't get the direct dials because cold calling you can still do that, then go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn still you can go around those rules and you can still message people, you can still engage, you can still comment if they post, right? Sometimes that doesn't happen all the time, but you can still do that. So that's like really, really important to do if you have the opportunity there. So that's just something I would definitely take advantage of if you're not. Also, as well, we talked about this a little bit, and some people are asking, right? Like when it comes to personalizing the email, like how much? So you're talking about that first sentence, which you mentioned from like Mark Cuban's standpoint, is the first sentence, is that the only thing you should personalize and everything else is like, hey, you already have templated. Should you personalize the first three sentences? Like, what is the level of personalization you should take in an email for these lines?
Yeah. So the way that I think about it, my main email framework that I use and teach is 4 sentences plus an optional PS. So the first sentence is context for why you're reaching out based off of some form of a trigger. So what observation do you have about this account that you researched that is causing you to reach out to this person now? So that first sentence is always going to be customized. Then you have sentence 2 and 3, which are telling the story, which for the story in outbound for me is what is the current state. So describing the problem so that the prospect understands that you get it. And then the third sentence is the solution. So those sentences I think usually can be uh, templated because you should be building a target account list for a certain persona. So every VP of sales you reach out to should generally have the same problem and at least one of the same, and then you obviously have the same solution. Sorry. And then my fourth sentence is the interest-based CTA. So like sparking a conversation, not asking for time right away. I think it sounds too salesy. And then I also add the optional PS statement. The PS statement is actually where I do what I call personalization. So that's like the funky stuff. They have like a dog or like they like golf, they run marathons. And I feel like a lot of people spend 20 minutes trying to build an analogy when they find something about somebody, where
Yep.
I actually believe that a cold email should be relevant. Why are you reaching out? What's the business problem that you solve? What's the solution? Do all that more gimmicky stuff in the PS statement so that it's separated from the actual email. So long story short, first sentence is always customized for the trigger. And then if you want to, the PS statement, which is the fifth sentence.
PS statement is one of the most underrated things in a cold email, for sure. Because to your point, people try to tie in some personal thing when you can just add it to the PS and it saves you a ton of time. Y'all, we have about like 9 minutes left here. Any lasting questions that you have? Let's put them in here. All right, cool. So, question here is: do you ask for the meeting in the first email in your cadences?
No, I ask for interest. So
Simple.
like, would you be opposed to having a conversation? Is this on your radar? Opposed to taking a peek, that kind of stuff. You want to facilitate a conversation or make it like less daunting to be like, do you want to book a 30-minute meeting with me? It comes across as heavy sometimes, especially if you're not selling it to salespeople, because a lot of advice you're seeing on LinkedIn and all these places is people selling to salespeople, where I feel like we get it. We're a bit more forgiving. Like, sure, you can ask for a meeting and it's not the end all be all. But sometimes for other personas, like you have to be a little bit softer in your approach.
You do. No, 100%. Train a lot of people in the IT security realm, and you definitely cannot ask for the meeting of the first email. You got to be very subtle. You have to change your approach a little bit, and that's just like reading the room and understanding that. I think this is a fantastic question here because there's a lot of elements to it. So we'll bring it up. But as you see right here, how do you approach addressing the prospect's pain points in the initial outreach, whether it's through LinkedIn, email, or other channels? Have you found certain techniques or messaging strategies be successful in capturing their attention and interest? I think also as well, this question can be compounded. How do you continuously address pain points throughout the entire cadence, right? And not just the initial outreach? Because you could come with a personalized email and it could be like everything that you wanted and be like, I have all this personalization, and they don't reply. How do you continuously address these pain points to then find something they reply to?
Yeah. So first of all, like taking a step back before you build a sequence or an email, I usually recommend, and I do this exercise with companies too, filling out a template, and maybe we could link it after, where you list out all your different personas and you actually try to understand their world. It's like, what metrics are they evaluated on? What are the problems that they face on a daily basis? How does your solution actually fix that problem? And when you build out this matrix, it makes building out a sequence in your email so much more easy, right? So what I would do, if you have 3 use cases or 3 pain points, again, don't put it all in one email. I would spread those emails out across a sequence, first of all. And then I always go off of the framework. It's like the first sentence is the trigger. Why did I reach out? Like, what did I find out about this account? And then the next sentence is always describing the pain to them. So what I call like the current state. What's the problem with the way that you're doing things today that we can solve for ultimately? So you're setting yourself up for that third sentence, which is the solution. I can even give an example if y'all want. Like right now, so at Barley, we're selling a compensation management platform. So one thing that I'm realizing, I'll go on companies' Glassdoor profiles and I'll literally call out employees that are complaining about compensation. It happens all the time. That's a relevant trigger, right? It's like, hey, on your Glassdoor profile right now, notice there's like 2 people in the last 6 months that have been complaining about compensation. And then you go into your problem statements. Like most HR leaders that I talk to are actually struggling with the same thing, and then kind of describing it and then going into how we at Barley help. That's like the winning formula time and time again for me.
I love that. So let us know if that helped answer your question there. I think that was the best way to answer that as a whole. And then this is a question as we wrap up. I think this is a question that probably is everyone's mind, and no one asked this. How often should you be creating cadences and evaluating if they work or not?
So first of all, from a statistically significant standpoint, you need 100 data points to prove anything. So I would generally say, like, for a sequence, you need to run at least 100 people through it. That's actually pretty little if you think about it. If you're adding 15, 20 prospects a day, you can probably do a quick test. Well, you can't do a full test in a week because people have to go through the 20-day sequence. So I usually say, as a rule of thumb, let a sequence run for a month. That being said, if you can update the first email in your sequence, like if you hit up 200 people and it's like a 0% reply rate, you can A/B test that and swap it out. But a full sequence, I run it for usually at least a month, sometimes 3 months.
Love it. I think three months has been always my optimal. Like, that gives you so much data to really understand what's going on. So as we have 5 minutes left here, if someone has a lasting question, let us know in the chat. But Florin, if people enjoyed this conversation today, where can they find you? Where can they get more insights?
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. I post multiple times a week. And again, my newsletter, Prospecting from the Trenches, like I'm doing this all day, every day. Even as a leader, I still prospect to keep myself sharp and try to figure out like where is the future going of the sales profession and outbound and everything. Super passionate about that. I also just dropped an email conversion course, which is on my LinkedIn profile. So 3+ hours of videos with everything I know about sequencing and email.
Guys, go check that out. Do not hesitate to go grab that. Definitely go connect with Florin. We'll have one lasting question here. Do you have any examples of creative or attention-grabbing subject lines that worked well for your cold outreach? How do you strike the balance between creativity and maintaining a professional tone?
Yes, I do. So the best framework for subject lines that has worked for me, and this got over 90% plus opens to engineering leaders, was this idea of calling out direct reports by name of your prospect, and then also provoking the cost of inaction. So I'll give you an example. At my last company, we were selling into heads of engineering, and it was an engineering leadership mentor platform. So I would reach out to the VP of engineering. I would find 2 directors or managers on their team, and I would literally call them out in the subject line by name. So it'd be like, Florin and Morgan or whatever. And then I would also provoke the cost. The cost of inaction is what happens if they don't use our mentorship platform, which we found that there tended to be a retention issue. So people that got mentorship were more likely to stay at a company.
Yep.
So what I would do is I'd combine those 2 ideas, and I would say something like to the VP of engineering, what happened if Morgan and Florin leave? And now it's like, okay, this person is calling out 2 people on my team. Why would they leave? Like, what's happening? It's like sparks curiosity. And it's just like got an insane open rate. And you can do the same thing with, for example, if you're selling a platform that helps with like SDR ramping, call out 2 SDRs like, Morgan and Florin, like ramp time over 4 months, like something like that, right?
Yeah,
that type of stuff is magic.
Yeah, you're sparking emotion, you're sparking curiosity. They haven't seen that before. They're definitely going to open and they're definitely going to reply. Makes a ton of sense. So hopefully that helped answer that question. Sherry said she's excited, so that's great. And so hopefully y'all use that insight, y'all use that wisdom. Thanks so much for tuning in on another episode with us, going over some cadences, and hopefully y'all use these tactics to get results. And we'll see you all the next time. Appreciate you, Florin, coming on.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Cheers.